He's been highly involved in issues of water, environmental protection, climate, and flooding in the area. And he also has a number of connections to Northwestern. So he at one point had been a lecturer, a professor at Loyola just down the road, so he's well used to the university campus environment. And I just found out that his daughters had attended Northwestern and recently graduated. A few years ago. So he has multiple connections here. I understand you've never given a talk on campus. So we're extremely happy to have him here to address something that he cares about a lot and that we care about a lot. So please join me in welcoming Congressman Quigley.
Good morning. Morning. It occurred to me, and I have this great staff in DC, they wrote this great speech on climate change that, not only would I be speaking to the choir, but the choir is a lot more knowledgeable than I am. So that maybe isn't the best idea. So let me talk to you a little bit about the real problem that we're facing with climate change. It is the political reality that it is going to be very difficult to do anything in this country about climate change other than what you've seen this president do at this point, executive orders. So let me explain why that is the case. Years ago when I was a Cook County Commissioner, I was working on the south side of Chicago on Lake Calumet. If you read the natural history of the region, it begins the chapter on Lake Calumet as an area that was impacted by every assault known to man, save a nuclear bomb. Yet Lake Calumet was starting to come back, right? It's starting to thrive, which was some of the good news. But the Port Authority that owns the lake at that time decided that they wanted to either fill it in or make it a haven for motorboats, I swear to God. So I called upon people like you to explain the problem. I went to some of the country's best scientists to talk about this issue, and several of them came here and briefed me on this. And I talked to some of the best and brightest right here in the Chicagoland area about what the impact would be of putting a harbor for motorboats in one of the last great natural resources in the city of Chicago. Excuse me, boy. So I went to talk to reporters about this, and there was a Sun-Times reporter who was kind enough to give me a story on it. So I started to get into the issues, and he puts the pen down, and he goes, Mike, 6th grade reading level. So I said, all right, the boats will scare away the birds. And that's what he wrote. So all those scientists who had briefed me said, thanks, Quigley, I flew in to tell you that. That's the best you can do. The boats will scare away the birds. Folks, that's where we are in the debate in Congress, other than the fact that we're really not getting into those issues at all. Oh, thank you. I won in a special election 7.5 years ago. And what was interesting to me was that Jan Schakowsky said, Mike, you're going to have access to some of the great minds in the world, which is true. There's the Library of Congress. We have great staff. Nobel laureates call on us. Yet I serve with people who don't believe in climate change. How bad is this? Speaker of the House, President of the Senate, right? The people who run this country, who run this House, don't believe in climate change. I serve with people who don't believe in evolution. My first meeting there was with a congressman from the western suburbs, the only physicist in the Congress, Bill Foster. We were discussing this with folks there in a committee hearing, and they were asking questions in the most unique way, some of my colleagues. And it occurred to me that they didn't want to ask the questions they really wanted to ask. I said, Bill, what are they doing? He said, they're asking questions so that the answer doesn't include the word evolution. And that's where we are, folks. When I first started this business, an alderman in Chicago told me, if you have to explain, you're in trouble. So in my first term, when we actually had a shot on this and we passed the bill out of the House with Mr. Waxman as the chairman of that committee, he explained, right? But the other side was just saying, no, it's just a tax bill. It's just costing you money. It's just making you spend more money. It's a job killer. So the issue didn't become climate change. The issue became, is this a job killer? And in a half of a sentence, not even a paragraph, they could tell people this wasn't what you want. And it flipped the whole issue. It wasn't whether or not climate change existed. It was an issue of climate change is killing jobs. Or the people who theorize or even raise the issue of climate change are killing jobs. I serve with people who believe that Satan put dinosaur bones in the ground to lead us astray. I serve with people who think like that. You know, this has profound impacts on our health issues. It has profound impacts on all policy issues that you all care about, right? Now, you know, just a term ago, we were talking about senators who had a very unique belief about women's reproductive health systems. Just extraordinary. It became the focus of the debate. So you all are talking about this on the highest levels. How to explain this, how to understand it. But the debate among the current elected officials is that it's a Chinese hoax, right? And the issue is either talked about in the most bizarre fashion like that, or it's not talked about at all. It's just not the focus there. And that's going to explain. So when you go to Congress and you give a speech a month on this, and you talk about the fact that there are literally thousands of peer-reviewed scientific studies that say that climate change is real and that man contributes to that, and there are 0 peer-reviewed scientific studies that say the opposite, you don't get a reaction. I think when you think about the policy issues that you care about, that you somehow imagine that they're on the House floor and that there are votes about this on an ongoing basis. This is a Congress which statistically is the worst Congress in the history of the United States on the environment. And if it wasn't for this progressive president, the most progressive president in the history of the United States on environmental issues, right? Doing the executive orders you did, you'd have nothing accomplished on climate change. We were supposed to go to Paris as part of this in the closing days. Almost the entire House was supposed to go. I suspect what the Speaker of the House thought at the time was we were going to go there and see this fail and fall apart at the end. Instead, what happened is you saw this actually pass. There was actually a treaty that was agreed to in Paris. So within 24 hours of our plan to go, Speaker of the House canceled that trip. We didn't go because they didn't want to see us supporting what was a coronation of something that they disagreed with. So arguing rationally becomes extraordinarily difficult. What you see in the most typical fashion is the following. Deny the problem exists. An understandable reaction to an inconvenient problem. Many deniers create false or context data out of context, sets that seem to prove that warming is slowing or doesn't exist. Deny who are the cause. From sunspots to inconsistent atmospheric measures, we've heard all sorts of reasons why any global warming that may exist certainly isn't our fault. But again, the junk science is debunked. I serve with those that even say that claim it is unthinkable that mankind can so fundamentally alter God's earth that is hubristic to even think so. What else do they say? They deny it's a problem. Most common claim. What I've heard recently on the Appropriations Committee is it's deny that we can do anything about it, deny that we can solve it. This is perhaps the most insidious of the climate denial, is the false belief that nothing we can do to stop the warming will cause. Deniers claim that combating global climate change is too expensive and will hurt the poor, when in fact the opposite is true. The most vulnerable among us are the ones that stand to lose the most and are the least capable of adapting to the new realities of a warmer world. I'll give you an example of how that got played out. We actually started working on these issues as it involves the military and what they do. Now, I appreciate the fact that DOD was late to the game addressing climate change. But when they finally got to climate change, appreciate the fact that a lot of that had to do with the fact that addressing this issue had to do with the safety of our troops. And often the fatalities that took place in places like Afghanistan had to do with the convoys that were bringing supplies, mostly energy, to our outposts. So if those outposts had the ability to be more sustainable and address climate change in the meantime, you would save lives. Those amendments to help the Pentagon go forward with that were voted down on a partisan basis because they didn't want to acknowledge that climate change exists. That's how bad things have gotten. Claim that it's too late. The last stage of climate denial, also the least common, thankfully, is the claim that it's too late to act to prevent any real change to our climate. This can be particularly insidious because it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy that is dead wrong. Obviously, the time to act is now. The American public gets that and wants to do something about that. But it's unfortunately what we're addressing as we speak. This is if you watch it and you do the studies that relate to this in committee, it's almost the same tactics that were involved with the denial of cigarettes and their addictive qualities. So those of you who are involved in this and understand the science, you know, what in the final analysis is your challenge? It is to get past this. Those who deny climate and those who don't support you in Congress are not going to be changed because, frankly, a conference. Their minds aren't going to be changed by talking to others who you already see your support. They're going to be changed when the base core of their constituencies tell them otherwise, right? The challenge for you is to synthesize this to points that people understand. Everyday people who, for whatever reasons, want to make this easier to not have to address. That's the challenge, and I don't know how this necessarily is going to. Obviously, elections matter, and elections matter, but until we get to that point where we have a chance to get to the floor, because in the meantime, all the other issues that you might care about aren't getting to the floor either. I've been there 7.5 years. We haven't had a hearing. We haven't had a committee hearing on gun violence. There have been no discussions of getting a climate change bill of any sort on the floor since my first term when Mr. Waxman bill got out of the House. That's how bad this has gotten. This is how much more we have to do to educate the public. These are complicated issues, but it's going to take a groundswell of effort to help people understand this and to help them start pushing their lawmakers. The most frustrating part, I guess, in closing is you're not even seeing this in the debates at all. None of these issues, because this has become reality TV. So that's only part of the frustration that we exist here, but I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. We have made some efforts, again, largely because we have the most progressive president in the history of the United States on environmental issues. And as I spoke with him last week, it reminded me that he's not progressive on some environmental issues. He's progressive on all of them. And a thoughtful discussion on all of those, where you're analyzing this, is he didn't decide, well, I won't be good on the environment on this issue. He actually analyzed the same issue and said, if we're going to address all our environmental concerns, we're going to work with the countries that can do most about them. Because if we don't, China is not waiting in the wings to introduce trade measures, that are more progressive on labor and environmental issues. In its own sad way, he's pushing back against folks who won't get past the theology on these points. And won't get past the fact that we have to address them head on and force people in the fastest growing sector, economic sector in the globe, to address overfishing, overlogging, all the other environmental issues, labor issues, and so forth. He doesn't change overnight from one issue to another. I've known him since before he was a state senator. So what I found with him is that he sincerely believes that, and if we're going to move forward dealing with climate change, on all the things that we do, including trade, it is to push the rest of the world toward that end. He is clear and consistent, and I'd like to think so am I. So you in the room who are addressing these issues, understand that. We may disagree on some of how those things get done. I will tell you, until there is a better political solution, this is going to be very difficult. You are light years ahead of where Congress is. And at this point in time, until elections change some of that, and you can help synthesize this policy analysis into a more coherent form that the everyday public can understand, we're going to be addressing these same issues. So thank you for what you do. It's an honor to serve you. It's an honor to be part of discussions like this. But I do think we have to recognize, in a polarized world that we're in right now, it is those that can work in the middle to move this extraordinarily complicated issues forward that are going to succeed. Everything else in a noisy world is noise. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Congressman Quigley, for those insightful comments. And it's good to hear the real situation in Washington and give us an idea of what we can do to change that. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the sponsors of this workshop. I'm Aaron Packman. I'm the Director of the Center for Water Research at Northwestern University. We are one of the sponsors, along with the Institute for Sustainability and Energy and the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences. I was also reminded to tell you that there's a Twitter hashtag associated with this meeting, so if you want to tweet out results, it's actually on the screen, NUCCS16. At this point, we will get a Northwestern perspective on climate issues from my colleague, Brad Sageman of the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences, truly one of the people who had inspired and really brought into being the whole climate change symposium, and he's going to give you a few thoughts on the history and his perspective on climate change.
I don't think I'm going to have any signs. I don't read signs. It's a pleasure to come speak with you this morning. I'm just going to wait until I get my pictures up. Oh, great. I don't think I need that. So my name's Brad Sageman. I'm chair of the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences, a job I've been doing for the last 10 years. And I'm almost at the end of that. It's been a pleasure to serve in that role because I've been able to be engaged in a number of the issues that we're talking about today. I'm also part of the leadership team for ISON, the Institute for Sustainability and Energy at Northwestern. So I was asked to provide a little bit of background on this event and kind of give you a perspective. Let me first say a word about ISON. ISON was started in about 2008 as the Initiative for Sustainability and Energy at Northwestern. There was an initial university investment, and the primary mission was to stimulate and enhance research, teaching, and outreach within the university community related to sustainability and energy issues. The Climate Change Symposium was one of the first sustainability-related outreach events that we developed. Most of the early events we had were pretty much focused on climate science and climate policy. As time went on, we thought it would be great to start to focus in on more specific issues. Really, the nature of the symposium is let's use some of our resources to invite experts in these fields to Northwestern and enhance our conversation. Our role as a university is to educate, and all issues should be open for examination. So that's what the purpose of the symposium is. We focused in the last couple of events on issues like fracking, shale gas, and then especially when Aaron's Water Research Center was developed, it seemed like an obvious thing to focus on water. So that's what got us here. I'll just give you a quick rundown on what the past events have been. So in 2009, the first climate change symposium was largely focused on climate science and climate policy. The keynote speaker was Lonnie Thompson. Lonnie Thompson is a well-known glaciologist from Ohio State University. And that year, he was a recipient of an honorary doctorate from Northwestern. There were also talks that year from climate policy people. Michelle Betzel from Colorado State University gave an excellent talk on sort of the policy framework leading to Copenhagen. The next event was 2010. The focus was on carbon and climate, lessons from the past, solutions for the future. The keynote speaker that year was none other than Ralph Keeling. Now there's a little history there that relates to Northwestern that you might be interested in. Ralph Keeling, who is a professor at Scripps, University of California, San Diego, is the son of Charles Keeling, who was a Northwestern chemistry PhD graduate. And Charles Keeling was the guy who was originally hired by a scientist named Roger Revelle to begin making CO2 measurements in the atmosphere at Mauna Loa in Hawaii. This is known as the Keeling curve. And this Keeling curve here, which has become almost iconic in terms of the visible representation of what's happening with CO2 in the atmosphere, has driven a lot of thoughts about climate change. The next event was in 2012. So we kind of focused on local impacts, global solutions. The keynote speaker that year was famous glaciologist Richard Alley from Penn State University. Richard Alley is well known as the narrator of the series Earth, the Operator's Manual, which if you haven't seen, it's an excellent series. And he brought his energy and enthusiasm to Northwestern for that event. In 2014, we focused on issues like shale gas, fracking. So the energy piece of it, especially those components of conventional energy that we are looking in the toward the future to try and move away from. The keynote speaker that year was a good colleague and friend of mine, Michael Arthur, who was a faculty member from Penn State University, and had spent the last 10 years working in Pennsylvania on the Marcellus Shale, which is one of the leading shale gas plays in the United States. And he had spent a lot of time at the interface between the public and the energy industry and had a lot to share about that. So that kind of brings us up to the current event. I just wanted to emphasize something that Aaron also mentioned. Through the years, there's been a number of sponsors at Northwestern of these events who've kind of shared in making it happen. So the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, where Aaron is a faculty member, my own department, and in particular, the fund provided by Ken Cohen, who's an alumni of Northwestern from Exxon, and has provided funding to help support these types of events. The Environmental Policy and Culture Program and the Environmental Science Program, Plant Biology and Conservation Program, and we've received funding from the alumni of Northwestern. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of these different organizations for helping to support the Climate Change Symposium over the years. And then, of course, I've added the Water Research Center on the end there as the newest member of this consortium. Okay, so that's about all I have to share with you today. That hopefully gives both the audience and the speakers who we've invited here this year a little bit of context for the Climate Change Symposium. And I just want to personally thank all the speakers for coming and joining the event this year. This, of course, is the program for the rest of the day. I'll hand it back to Aaron. Thank you.
Well, so you heard a little bit about the history of the symposium and where we're trying to go. So we're going to start now with our first technical plenary talk, which is by Mark Johnson, from the director of the